Thank you for hosting us today for Maddie's Fund. It is my pleasure to bring together this incredible group of kitten savers. Our topic for today is support for kittens in the field, keeping kittens safe outside of shelter walls. It is the second session in a 5-part series for saving kittens in combination with Royal Canin and Maddie's Fund. Today I have the honor of being joined by Kristen Hassen-Auerbach from Pima Animal Shelter and Heather Kennedy from Kansas City Pet Project. We also have a substitute speaker, Diane Summers, for Orange County Animal Services. Today, in our second session in this series, we're going to be talking about how you might be able to identify ways you are unintentionally sabotaging your own goals by swimming upstream, access your shelter's opportunity to leverage animal control officers, field officers, and volunteers to better serve kittens outside your walls, and ensure resources for the ones that come into your shelter. We'll talk about how you can activate your community to achieve your kitten goals, increase your kitten live release rate, decrease your kitten budget, and hyper-unify your messaging to alleviate the burden on your frontline staff. And we'll also share 2 software tools that you can use to handle a lot of this communication and organization for you so you can set it and forget it. So we've all heard and buy into the concept of leaving baby kittens with their mothers when they're found outside. And we have a topic of don't kidnap the kittens, wait till 8, and a lot of reinforcement for treating found kittens like wildlife, like baby bunnies and other animals that you might find outside. But we know it's not that simple. We know that some of these kittens really do need our help. And we also know that the timing of when we bring kittens into our shelter or into our foster systems is more nuanced than that. So I'd like to introduce Kristen Hassen-Auerbach to tell us a little bit of the story of how kittens are served and what their needs are in Pima, Arizona.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm so glad and proud to be here with Dr. Levy and the others talking about this important topic today. My name's Kristen, and I run a shelter in Tucson, Arizona. So we can go to the next slide. So the shelter that I run takes in 19,000 animals annually, with about 6,000 of those being cats and kittens. In 2019, we took in about 3,500 kittens. And achieved a 89% noses in, noses out raw save rate. And we sent last year about 3,000 cats and kittens to foster home. What's unique about our community is that we're 9,000 square miles of Sonoran desert and have the longest stretch of the U.S.-Mexico border of any county. We have about 1 million residents, but this county is the size of roughly New Hampshire. It has a high rate of poverty, and the desert climate means that we have lots of wild animals roaming around. So we have really been working over the past few years to better serve cats and kittens. We struggled initially with pretty high death rates of kittens coming into the shelter, so we've made a lot of changes. So taking in this many animals, it would be really easy to just sort of like lump everybody into categories, but we have really taken a very different approach to how we address cat and kitten issues. That adorable kitten that you see on the screen was caught in a chimney. So every kitten is evaluated individually. And so our whole philosophy is that every animal is an individual with an individual set of needs. And we really focus on taking in kittens that actually need to be in shelter versus those that don't. So we try to serve most in the community and through our rescue partners and take in the ones that really need us. And because of that, we treat virtually every medical condition that comes into us. We ask finders to help us foster and care for kittens. We engage every single person in our community that finds a kitten is asked for help. Healthy cats and kittens stay in the community unless they are in danger or really need to come in for some other reason. And the crux of our program is that we do not have a kitten nursery. We don't have any overnight care. the goal is that every kitten who comes in leaves within just a couple hours of arrival. So they come in and they leave the same day, same afternoon. And that means that the vast majority of the care of really tiny kittens is done in foster care. So Pima County has an unusually high number of hoarding cases. We're dealing with 10 potential hoarding cases of cats alone at any given time. Last year, we took in close to 1,000 animals from hoarding cases, but hoarding has really served for a catalyst for us because when my second day of being at PAC, we were faced with a hoarding case of 60 cats in absolutely horrendous medical condition, many with caleci and other illnesses, but they came in this giant group into PAC, and it completely overwhelmed the system. We really didn't know how to cope with it, and because there were just so many of them. And so we started taking a really different approach to hoarding cases, sort of bringing animals in over time and triaging the most critical cases first while treating some animals and keeping them in the home. What this has allowed us to do is treat every hoarding cat as an individual and to totally change our approach. When we house cats from hoarding cases, we now house them all together. They come in groups of 5 to 10 and they stay with each other as they move through the system. That has completely eliminated cats dying because they're stressed, but it's also taught us that there's so many different things we can be doing when it comes to handling cats and kittens, and how easy it is to go back into this mindset of, oh my gosh, 50 animals just came into the shelter. So we're trying to slow the flow, steady it, and then give every single cat the individual care and attention that they need. And the result of that is that our hoarding case cats have the same save rate or higher as our cats overall. So this case management approach does take a lot of resources, but those resources are so much done by volunteers and by foster caregivers. And it really, we've developed a whole range of evaluating what cats and kittens need to come into us. And then we reach back out to the community because this year, particularly with COVID, we've had fewer kittens coming in and more going to rescue partners, but we had to reach out to the rescue partners to ask them what they need, and what they needed was spay-neuter services for those kittens. So that's what we're working on this year, but what it's allowed us to do is every single animal gets the care it needs, and we treat, as I said before, we're treating every condition that comes in and making life-saving effort for everything from diabetic cats to cats in renal failure to our tiniest kitten. So the intake to foster system, the way it works is that as soon as animals enter, they are scheduled for a live outcome. Prior to COVID, we did this by really having foster coordinators waiting for animals to arrive. Now we're really backing up the approach even more and doing something really different, which is when people find a litter of kittens in need, or they find a cat that's in need that's going to come in, they're calling us first. They're bringing those animals to us. And the goal is that by the time those animals even arrive, they're scheduled for their medical care, but they're already scheduled to leave. And it's an attempt to make it even faster that animals get out. And the result of that has been, since COVID, our average length of stay for cats is 9 days total. And the goal is that no cat spends more than 30 days in shelter so that everybody is moving in and out as quickly as possible. And this is a big operation. Last year at this time, we had about 400 cats in the shelter. This year, we have about 55 to 60 on any given day, and with the vast majority being housed in foster homes.
Kristen, how has the COVID pandemic affected your operation in terms of kittens? There's certainly as many kittens out there in the world that need help this year as there were last year, but things have changed so much. How has your shelter adapted to that?
So much of what has happened has been the community stepping up to help. And at the beginning of COVID, I think nationally we recognized that in order to save all the animals that needed us, it was going to take a collective effort. It was going to take us coming together and everybody in the community helping. And so we have really asked everybody in the community to help. And that means that our rescue partners are taking more kittens directly. PAC is really focused on sick and injured kittens. We've seen our save rate go up because we're able to give those kittens so much more than we could. And we're asking people to help hold kittens when they can and take care of them. We have foster kits ready. The trick now, and when I talk about this, it's far from perfect. Several thousand kittens coming in one spring and summer is incredibly challenging, and we really never slow down when it comes to kittens. So it's not perfect yet, and we're asking the community for a lot more. What we're kind of learning is that if we take what COVID has brought us, we've learned two things. The community, including rescue partners, adopters, fosters, and volunteers, will help way more than we ever knew. But the second thing is we have to provide them the support in order to help. And that's at PAC what we're building now is we're building in a whole new support system so that those people that want to help can do so and they can be successful. Saving a tiny kitten's life is no small job. So we are really working on getting our caretakers everything they need to do that. Okay, so here's what PAC looks like today, and I am wrapping up. We're just so excited about all the stuff happening with cats and kittens, but everybody goes to foster on the same day that they get here. We house our ringworm and our URI cats and kittens in public areas. It's so much in sheltering, we keep those animals in the back, and we've been doing this for 2 years now. We used to have rooms full of ringworm kittens, and we actually had such sad things happen. They didn't get the attention they needed because they were kind of tucked away in the back. And we would sometimes lose those kittens just because of that. Now they're in the public areas and they get out right away. They go to foster and adoption almost as fast as our non-URI, non-ringworm. We treat every medical condition, kittens to very, very old 19-year-old cats that come in because they're skinny. Our bonded pair cats get to stay together now. This is something as an open admission giant shelter we never believed was possible, but we saw too many times cats who had lived together their whole lives would be taken apart, and one of the cats would not survive that separation. So we no longer have to make those decisions. We can keep cats together when they want to stay together. Our old cats, we have a foster coordinator. All she does is sending geriatric, senior, and older adult cats to foster. They get in and out right away. They do not enjoy being in a shelter, and so we try to make their stay short and sweet. We fund TNR and perform SNR here, so we do. Our trappers in the community are bringing in about 5,000 cats to the clinic that we fund every year. So we are, some of the things that have happened since COVID and where we're working to improve, because a lot of times in these presentations, you hear all the great things, but there's a lot that's hard too. One of those is that we're building a supported self-rehoming system. Unfortunately, due to evictions, due to job loss, there are a lot of people that aren't going to be able to keep their cats and kittens. And so the supported self-rehoming program helps them do that outside of the shelter, but probably more importantly, it helps people maintain a connection with the future adopter. So when you surrender an animal to the shelter, you usually never see it again. In this case, when you do the rehoming yourself with our support, you get to stay in touch with that new owner and know your baby is safe and loved. We're working on. Are
you using any of the nationally available self-rehoming tools? Which one?
Yeah, so there's home to home and rehome. Check them both out. We're actually using both of them, or getting ready to. And we're also supplementing that service from our end. So those technologies are amazing, and also sometimes people need our help. They need sample adoption applications. They need help with the meet and greets and things like that. Our save rate of kittens under 2 weeks last year was pretty poor. It was under 80%. We were really struggling to keep those kittens alive because they were going to foster, and they probably could have had a higher survival rate with overnight emergency medical care. We're just not funded for that. So we're improving our training for our neonatal fosters. We've made some changes to protocol, and so we're seeing that save rate go up. We are trying to develop a better intake assessment. So this is one of the really cool areas of innovation. What we're trying to do is build video assessment. So if you find a litter of kittens, we don't just ask you questions. You can text us. We can connect through video chat. You can show us the kittens, and we can tell you if they need to come in, or we think they can stay in the community, and what you should do. We can tell you approximately how old they are. And we're dealing with some friendly stray cats that need to come into the shelter, and this is a really tough one. We are seeing an increase in abandonments because while the eviction crisis hasn't quite hit, people are abandoning their property and leaving their animals behind. And so we're really trying to assess what cats are in the community that might really need our help. we're finding some friendly, skinny cats that seem to have been indoor cats that aren't adjusting well versus cats that are just hanging out and doing fine. And then, of course, RTO is still an abysmal 1 to 2%. And we really haven't even begun to explore the technologies we need to get cats home more quickly. So those are just a few of the things that we're working on. Okay, lastly, this is one of my favorite stories. The first slide you saw of me was a cat named Vigo. He was surrendered for euthanasia. People don't realize this, but about 800,000 animals are surrendered to U.S. shelters every year for euthanasia. But those are often very healthy, very treatable animals. It's just people don't know what, if the animal has problem, they're either asked to surrender for euthanasia or they don't know they have other options. So Figo was one of those cats. He was surrendered at 14 for euthanasia. And we, of course, we don't take animals in for euthanasia. Everybody comes in as an owner surrender, and we evaluate them. And Figo was just fine. He came in, the owner requested that. We said, we don't really do that here unless the animal is sick and suffering and really needs to be euthanized. So Figo went up for adoption, and I kind of lost track of him, but I saw this post on social media a couple of months later, and he had been adopted by someone and was living this pretty wonderful life, and he was a really special cat. And it kind of brings it all home. And when we talk about kittens and we talk about keeping them in the community, we're not just talking about those kittens. We're talking about not overcrowding our shelters with animals that can safely live in our communities. And we're doing that so we can save so many other lives that we've never even been able to think about saving before. So cats like Figo, because we're doing these programs, cats like Figo actually get to live a wonderful life and have a chance at adoption. And so when we talk about kittens, it's a much bigger conversation about all the lives we can save if we're more thoughtful about what animals are institutionalized and what animals stay in the community.
Thank you, Kristen. That's just such a wonderful story, and I'm still in awe of the fact that most of your cats move from intake to foster the same day. That's so powerful to think that they don't have to be in a cage and they don't have to go through that scary experience and be exposed to all the risks of being in a shelter. And that's the perfect lead-in for what Kate Hurley talked about in our last session about kittens. Is we have in the past had some kind of rigid ideas about the role of shelters in kitten rescue, and especially big open admission shelters that, they just need to be open at all times regardless of the services that were available. And on the left, you see some of the things we hear when we start suggesting changes, that the kittens will die if they don't come into the shelter, that open admission shelters don't have any options for managing intake in other ways, and that this is our only chance to sterilize the mom. And as an alternative, Kate suggests that we could leave moms with their kittens and provide them with food and water where she is, if she's safe. That if all of our foster homes are full right now, can we help the finders support these kittens? And you're going to hear about a great software solution to organizing that from Diane at Orange County Animal Services. And can you care for the mom until the kittens are weaned and then bring her in? And this all relies on some basic principles that we've been digesting and sorting out as the COVID pandemic has really forced us to think hard about how we're using our resources to make sure that our shelters are running optimally. We're still meeting our minimum required essential services with the limited staff and capacity that we have these days. And one of the basic principles is that kittens are generally better off with their mother, and mothers are generally better off with their kittens until the kittens are old enough for weaning. And Dr. Heather Kennedy is going to talk a little bit about that time frame of between weaning and adoption. So when the kittens are weaning, but maybe not 8 weeks old for a traditional adoption yet, and how there are some really important kitten care factors that we need to weave into that. That social cats and kittens are generally better off in homes than in cages, even if the cages in the shelter are really nice. So I love what Kristen's doing in Pima of getting animals especially cats, quickly into foster homes where they don't have to live in a cage. And that unsocial community cats are generally better off with a little help, usually spay and neuter and vaccinations, staying safe outside rather than being stressed inside in a home. So the attempt to socialize adult cats or to foster feral cats with their kittens until their kittens are weaned can lead to a lot of welfare issues for the mother. But that shelters are the safety net. They're the place to triage sick and injured kittens, facilitate adoption of friendly weaned kittens, and provide spay-neuter services. So we're not saying close the door to kittens and cats, but to use our shelters more strategically. We talked last time about what we're calling the Feline Superhighway at the Million Cat Challenge, and this is a document that is available on the website, and it summarizes that in general we think that kittens should be fast-tracked to adoption if they're social, and that generally community cats that are thriving in the environment should be fast-tracked to return to field or TNR programs. But that recognizing there's also a lot of off-ramps from this superhighway, so we can tailor our response to the needs of each individual cat and to the capacity of the shelter at that time. So Kristen talked about how they are using self-rehoming as an alternative to bringing cats into the shelter, and she mentioned both of these. I wanted to give you the links to these websites that allow people to post animals that they need to rehome, and then folks that are looking for animals can look them up, and it's almost like a dating service where people who need pets have an opportunity to review pets that are available, and then the owner who really knows about that animal much better than a stranger at a shelter would can screen and talk to those potential adopters, and that animal never has to go into the shelter system. So two very good different options. It is interesting to hear that Kristen is using both at Pima. So that's another option to really make sure that all of the pets that need to be rehomed have a way to do it. And sadly, shelters are all bracing for what may be another pandemic, which is a pandemic of evictions that are maybe coming and possibly having the highest wave of owner relinquishments ever experienced by animal sheltering. So hopefully that will not happen, but there's a lot of danger signals that it will. And so getting these systems up and running for self-rehoming is going to be very, very important. And that brings me to a project that I'm really proud of. It originated right here in Gainesville with our TNR group, Operation Catnip, and they call it Kitten Shelter Diversion. So Operation Catnip is primarily focused on traditional TNR for animals in the community, but very often the caregivers will report that they have little kittens, and these little kittens are often smaller than ideal for our TNR program. We like our kittens to be at least 3 months of age in the TNR program so they can have a valid rabies vaccine. But also we know that the mortality rate in young kittens in the field is pretty high. So they're definitely better off going on that super highway to adoption. So we needed to find a way to fill that gap of supporting the caregivers and these little kittens until they were ready for being adopted, but we didn't want to become a kitten adoption agency either, and we didn't want these kittens going to our local shelter because our shelter was maintaining a 90% live release rate, but that would be under threat if there was a flood of little kittens coming in this time of year. So they developed this very interesting innovation. You can read about it at this link here, where the kittens, community kittens that people are caring for are eligible for free vaccines and medical care and spay and neuter. And then the partnership with the people who find these kittens is that they will find a home for the kittens. So we provide all of the medical support that is needed from pre-weaning through preparing them for adoption. When they are ready for adoption, they get a certificate and they graduate from the Kitten Shelter Diversion Program. And then the finder is the one that uses their network of friends and family to adopt out these kittens that have been spayed and neutered. It's worked really well. They've done last year was the first year they did it. They had over 700 kittens that were diverted from shelter intake through this program. I also want to draw attention to a new project of greater good, which is Feline Foster. This is an opportunity to expand your foster network dramatically. COVID has caused a lot of people to sign up to be fosters in waiting, which is a way that you can shorten that time that the kittens are actually in your care and go straight to foster. So if you go to Greater Good, you can find this feline foster system and review all of the offers for help. And then once the kittens are ready for adoption, they've been spayed and neutered by your program and they're still in foster care, there's some great online tools that are being developed that the fosters can actually adopt them right out. They don't need to come back to your shelter. You know, most shelters are still restricted on having the public come and visit, and so you can do virtual adoptions. And I just love this story. It was an article in a magazine where she talked about how she met her kitten online, and it was very much like speed dating. She actually became very nervous about meeting the cat online and making a good impression. And she said, like any new pet owner properly obsessed with their cat, I've already filled my phone with a few hundred photos of Olive. But the first one will always be the screenshot I took of her on FaceTime, licking her paw, my face in the upper right-hand corner, transformed by love. So all of this virtual opportunity to show off our kittens and find the people who are looking for kittens and discussing all the adoptions online is proving to be extremely successful, and I recommend that you leverage all of these online opportunities.
Dr. Levy, can I just add to that?
Yeah.
We haven't had people come back to adopt out animals. We haven't had animals come back to be adopted for years now. And
Wow.
Having sent several thousand cats and kittens to foster last year, the vast majority of them never return. And when there is a danger in them returning. There's illness, there's things that can happen. And the fosters are so attached to them that we found that letting the fosters do the adoption, talk about the best adoption counselors in the entire world, it's the fosters. So for shelters that are concerned about that, your fosters are going to do as good or better of a job as your organization 99% of the time. And we have seen literally no downside to doing this.
That's so encouraging, because I know sometimes on the Facebook groups we see concern about more kittens will be returned or they won't. They'll go to homes that aren't adequate. And I think what we're hearing from everybody who goes big and goes brave on this is it's so much better than having cats in a shelter and having people come and it's so hard to know the personality of a cat when it's in the shelter because it's such a frightening environment for them. So I'm very happy to hear about your experience, and it's not just a new COVID response, but something you've been doing all along. Are you using any formal technical tools to facilitate this, or are your fosters just kind of using all of their own networks informally?
We have very simple rudimentary procedures because there's a practical need to collect money and to legally complete the adoption. But we're still in the 1980s. You don't need technology, although I think technology is amazing and helps facilitate it. But our fosters are also just using Facebook Messenger and platforms like that to communicate. And it'll be interesting to see as the new technology develops that literally anyone could start doing this tomorrow. And I think one of the things people worry about the most is will they get their adoption fees? But there's easy ways to make sure that you do. And it's less costly for the shelter to not have the animals come back as well for adoption and not have to have staffing to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Kristen. Our next speaker will be Diane Summers, Director of Orange County Animal Services here in Florida. And for those folks who know the South, know that kitten season is year-round for us, but it's certainly harder in the summer. We're right at the peak challenging time, and COVID has turned everything upside down, and a lot of shelters have been trying to divert intake because their resources in the shelter are minimized. And they've developed some incredible tools for supporting people who find kittens in the field and getting them adopted without crowding them into the shelter. So I'm going to stop sharing now and turn it over to Diane.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So just to introduce myself, I'm the manager for Orange County Animal Services, serving the Central Florida area. We have a population of approximately 1.3 million residents here in the greater Orlando area. And similar to Kristen's shelter in Pima, we receive approximately 17,000 homeless animals annually. And so I'm going to be talking about our Wait Till 8 program, which is really a great program that marries the need for people to help kittens and technology in a way that really benefits everyone. But before kind of diving into why that program has been amazing, if we go back to before that program, it was very, very stressful for staff. We have strict guidelines from our veterinarians about how many kittens can stay in our shelter and after what point in the day they need to find placement. So that left those of us on the front lines scrambling day in and day out. And for anybody who's in the South, you know our summer is pretty much February through November. It is just hot here all the time. And we just receive so many kittens. Our average intake per day of animals is 50, but I'd say during the summer months, we can receive 50 kittens in a day. So it left us with this kind of crazy puzzle of, okay, I know this rescue's coming at 12 and they can take 3 kittens. Oh, and so Foster is driving by. I know she's open to taking lice kittens, so she can take these, and just working this kind of really chaotic process to save as many lives as possible, because at that point, whenever anybody rolled in with kittens, we said, sure, we'll take them off your hands. And so anybody who runs an open admission shelter knows that people will often come in and say, oh my gosh, I just found these kittens and I've done this amazing thing and I've brought them to you immediately. And you're welcome. And that is tough when they think they are bestowing this wonderful gift upon you, and you're just thinking, did you wait for the mother? Did you give them a chance? Or we've even had people say like, oh, here's a donation for you of a litter of kittens. So there's a lot that can be done from an education standpoint as well. And so I'm going to be speaking about our Wait Till 8 program. I think we have some slides to offer up for that. Thank you so much. So we're going to talk about messaging. We're going to talk about data collection, our educational resources, and just how we can track all of this and really show our success. To give you an idea of kind of what I was talking about with that scramble some years ago, our kitten euthanasia rate for the years 2017 to 2019 was at 51%. So more than half of the kittens that came into our shelter were humanely euthanized. And we do have euthanasia broken down by certain factors in our system, age, temperament, medical. 67% of animals were euthanized simply because of age. No other flaw other than age. So we knew it was a major area to tackle. We've been very fortunate with our dogs. We've achieved a 90% plus live release rate for dogs for years, but we have always struggled with cats. And we continue, to be honest, we continue to struggle with cats. But this program alone has made such a major impact in the past year. And so we can go to the next slide at this point. Messaging. That it's not just the shelter. It's really a community problem. The shelter is not the best place for these kittens to be, and that is something that people struggle to understand. They think of the shelter as this loving, caring place, and they can bring all the kittens here, and the kittens will receive round-the-clock care, and they'll have a personal attendant, tending to them at all times, and they'll thrive and go on to great homes. So it's eye-opening for that person when we say, actually, contrary to what you may perceive, this is not the ideal place for them. The ideal place for them is it could be potentially where they came from, or it could be with the finder. And we want to really empower the finder as much as we can. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So the way it works now, and we did start this program initially with our kennel staff. For similar municipal shelters where you have your kennel doing intake and then your field officers doing intake, if you want to kind of sample it and kind of walk before you run, it's a great way to start and just manageably do it with your kennel staff. We now offer it both in the kennel and the field. The way it works is somebody comes in, they say, oh, I have these little babies for you. You're so welcome for this great thing that I've done. And we lead them over to the computer. The landing page has an honest and impactful justification, and it explains why the kittens are high risk in the shelter environment. One of the best things about this is that it removes the burden from the staff member to have to explain that, and it is clear in text. The finder is then prompted with 2 choices: I do or I do not wish to participate. From there, the system gathers their information. Custom emails are sent depending on what they selected. And enrollment, and the form is built with JOT form. And I believe the next slide has the, oh, sorry about that. The enrollment is actually 98%. I know it's on one of these slides, but I'm just blown away by the enrollment rate. I think there's something about having to select, I decline and I wish to have the animals impounded, as opposed to I would like to participate in the program. That is shifting the burden entirely to the person. The fate of those kittens is no longer in the hands of animal services. It's in the hands of the person who brought them in. And truthfully, they do care. They've brought the kittens in. They've already demonstrated that they're not willing to walk past the problem. They're somebody who wants to intervene. So I think that's why the vast majority of them say at that point, once they're aware of the high risk environment of the shelter, they say, I do wish to participate. Because truthfully, if they say, I decline, we do try and find rescue, we do try and find foster, but they understand at that point there is a significant risk of humane euthanasia for those kittens. And so, yeah, just to reiterate, the finders, we want to be kind to them too. Even though, it can be a little bit difficult with some of these people, there's a lack of understanding, a lack of education sometimes in what we want our public to do, but they have demonstrated that they do care, and we want to be very appreciative of that. There is a moment of that initial shock and surprise when the light bulb goes off in their head that, oh, the shelter isn't the end all be all for these kittens. And maybe it's not what I thought. Maybe I need to play a more active role in what happens next for these kittens. And the in or the out choice is great because it shifts the power to them rather than us. We used to be so often criticized by the public because people would bring kittens in, and our officers at that point were very honest. They always accepted the kitten, but were very honest that there is a significant chance these kittens will be humanely euthanized, especially if those kittens happen to come in right before the end of the day when those resources were exhausted or there was little time left to explore them. So people would walk away angry. They would leave, negative reviews. That has significantly decreased since we've rolled out this program, because what we're saying is we will do the best that we can, but we're asking you to do the best that you can. And that may be taking in these kittens and keeping them. And they are immediately given resources, both physical and electronic. They get a goodie bag tangibly, and then they also get resources via email to them before they even have left the building. All right, and if we can go to the next slide. I believe this is our demo video. All right, and so this is the landing page and what the people see. And this is the blurb that I was referencing that kind of explains why kittens are high risk in the shelter environment and why, despite all of the measures and resources that we have, it is not enough. And the best thing about this, again, is it alleviates from the staff the need to reiterate the same blurb again and again and again. Because if we're being honest, the sales pitch that they make at 10 a.m. when they see their first person is going to be vastly different than at 5:45 when they see their last person. This makes it significantly easier for them, and we can ensure as well that the messaging is consistent. Because I'm sure any large shelter, you're dealing with a lot of staff members. People put their personal spin on it sometimes. You have people who tell people what they want to hear. You have people who sometimes are maybe too honest about the outcomes. When you do it that way, with the consistent messaging, you know that each and every time the people are hearing the same exact message. And so as you can see here, through JOT form, it collects their name, their address, their email. It asks if they found the cats in Orange County, because we are a municipal shelter serving Orange County. We only accept animals that are found within Orange County. If they happen to say that no, they found them from a neighboring county, we refer them to that county. But we do still email them the information so that even if their county does not have a similar program, they at least will get some educational support. It does ask if the kittens are with their mother, at which point trap, neuter, return comes into play as an option. So this is basically like one of those kitten intake decision trees, but you're seeing it in action. It's formulating right in front of our eyes. And officers can of course assist with this part of the description of the cats as well as the aging. We don't expect necessarily everyone to know the difference between a calico and a tortie. That can be tricky sometimes. And so this is all giving them a chance to interact with the staff. Approximate age of the kittens is another one where the staff member would help out, just because that can be confusing for people. And it's asking if there's any signs of ownership. And it does allow them to put in any comments. I know it might be a little bit hard to see, but this can be anything and everything they want to mention. It could be where the kittens were found. This might be particularly helpful just in the rare chance that somebody else reaches out and says, oh my gosh, I've lost my litter of kittens, and this is where I live, and we could potentially source back to this and see if those are in the Wait Till Late program, if they're in the shelter, and try and facilitate some type of reunification. And this particular person who's filling out the form has quite a bit to say. I appreciate how much they wish to share with us. This is something that Nick put together. And so for anyone who knows Nick, you know how near and dear this program is to his heart, and he wanted to be here to present this, but I am doing my best to do it justice in his absence. And so it gives them a chance to review everything that they have offered to submit. And then it gives them a thank you. And what we want to do too is immediately validate them for their choice. So if they have opted to enroll, they get an email, they get a gift bag. The gift bag includes, I'm calling it a gift bag because it's a goodie bag, but it has everything that they would need to get started, the essentials. And then when they get that email, they get that instantly. So by the time they've even made it back to their car, they have that email in their inbox saying, thank you so much. You're the best person ever. You've saved these kittens. And here's all the information that you need. And we, and here's a look at the email here. So it has their name, Mickey Mouse, and it says, thank you so much. It has some educational resources and of course videos by the one and only Kitten Lady, everyone's favorite. Because truly, I think when it comes to caring for kittens, especially for people who do not have cat and kitten experience, videos are really the way to go. And so I believe next in this video, it's going to show you what it looks like on the back end for us, because that basically concludes what the citizens will see. And now we're kind of getting into, from a shelter perspective, what we have the privilege of seeing via JotForm, which we absolutely love JotForm. Highly recommend. Utilize it for many different purposes here. You can see that it enables you to sort for different criteria. You can sort by zip code. For example, if you want to see, hey, is there a particular zip code where all of these kittens are coming from? You can identify issues as they're emerging. You can see, hey, am I having somebody who's finding litter after litter after litter? Because if so, maybe that's something else going on with them and we want to have a conversation on the side. Or are you actually maybe running a rescue? When we first started this program, it was really at the behest of Kindness for Cats, which is a local nonprofit primarily run by our most experienced foster parents. They really kind of pushed us into this, and Nick ran with it. We were so glad. We were initially a little bit hesitant because, truthfully, we always kind of offered people the opportunity to keep the kittens, but in an unofficial capacity. Having this actually structured into a program really made all the difference. And we're so happy with how it's worked out for us. Kindness for Cats at this point has largely stepped out of it, and it's shelter run at this point. But it's really important to mention that, though, because for shelters with active volunteer networks or with similar setups where you have fosters that are highly invested, you can run. This is Trello, and so we have an app, Zapier, that takes everything from JotForm, automatically puts it in Trello. And Trello is a task management program, highly recommend, very user-friendly. And so it automatically does all that. And so volunteers essentially, or staff members, can utilize this. You have different cards. It can be animals awaiting spay-neuter scheduling. It could be animals that have been adopted, animals about to return to the shelter that need to have their return scheduled. I believe it even lets you set up timers. So if you see that kittens are 2 weeks, you can pretty much guess in about 6 weeks they'll be ready to return. Set timers to remind you, hey, let me reach out to this person, see how they're doing, see what I can get them set up with. So you can see that the cards move around. It's very user-friendly, and you can enable volunteers to utilize it as well and really take the burden, once again, off of staff. I believe at this point, it just kind of is going to further demonstrate. One of the other amazing things about Trello is that you can just see the vastness of your program once it gets going as you scroll and see all of these different things. And each of these different colors means something. Everybody has their unique cards that you can move around for different purposes. And so together, using Trello, using Zapier, using JotForm, I realize it sounds like a lot of programs being thrown out all at once, but they actually all work very well together. And it was incredibly easy for us to implement once we had that basic understanding. So we let our kennel team kind of roll with it first, get it down. And then they were able to really speak to the success of it and how much it helped them in their day-to-day, which is what encouraged it to go to the field as well. So it's now offered shelter-wide. And I would say we've seen an approximate 10% jump in our cat live release rate since implementing this program. And another thing about this is these kittens are being diverted from the shelter. So what that means is from staff on the front lines, we're not scrambling every day, day in and day out, to kind of overwhelm our fosters, overwhelm our rescues. We can save them for the sick and injured kittens, the end of day kittens where maybe the person really can't take them back. It allows us to conserve our resources, and even more, it allows them to conserve their resources for the animals that are truly needy. So again, I can't say enough wonderful things about this program, and I owe a major thanks to Nick for being the champion to bring this to us and set it up. And it has been so helpful for us as an open admission shelter serving a large population and approximately 17,000 animals annually. It's only been in place for a year, but just in that year alone, seeing an approximate 10% cat live release rate, I think just really alone speaks to the success, and we anticipate that to only continue. So that about concludes my portion. I hope I did the program justice in Nick's absence, and I believe Heather is up next.
And one quick question before we move on. Can you share the app that allowed Jotform to speak to Trello? If I remember that, Zapier, is that correct?
Yes, it's Zapier, Zappier.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem.
I think there's so many remarkable things about this program, and one of them is that it's the people that find the kittens that are opting in. It completely changed the dynamic of it giving the people the power and the motivation to do this, and the fact that over 9 out of 10 kitten finders opt in and feel supported and confident enough is really transformational, I think, because that's not usually, their intent when they come in to go home with their little basket of kittens. The other thing that Nick told me is that the shelter, so people, of course, they get attached to their kittens when they raise them, and starting out with 100% of kittens that are served by this program, in the end, 1/3 of the finders adopt their kitten, 1/3 find a home with their friends and family, and 1/3 actually are returned to the shelter to be adopted. So as it's a very powerful diversion, not just for the time that the kittens are being raised, but also in the end. However, the shelter is very generous, and it provides that preventive health care and the spay-neuter for all of the kittens. So even if someone is keeping their kitten or they found someone else to adopt it, the shelter will make sure that they're spayed and neutered before they go. And Nick has spent an incredible amount of time developing this, and you might all be thinking, well, I can't do all this technical work. Who's going to do that for me? And Nick did it for you. He will share all of these programs, or not the programs, but the forms themselves. So you can actually just copy Nick's Jot form and the other templates that he's developed and use them in your program. So they're really ready to go and road tested. And I also love that they're doing this at the counter as well as in the field. So they can intervene and support kitten finders at any time. With that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Heather Kennedy. She's been a cat veterinarian ever since she graduated veterinary school, and has worked at several shelters and is now in charge of feline programs for Kansas City Pet Project. And she's going to talk about the really essential time between weaning and adoption, when everything we do can have such an impact on the personality and courage of kittens so that they are very adoptable. So take it away, Heather.
Thank you very much. Wait Till 8 is great, and I love that program, and it's something that KC Pet Project has done in the past and continues to do when there are finders willing to foster. And Diane's presentation was excellent. We're going to try to implement some of those things as well. Wait Till 8 works great as long as you have someone who has a home that's going to care for these kittens until they're 8 weeks old. But that's not always the case. So there are two different scenarios. Sometimes the kittens are out in the field. There are kittens that we are convinced should best be left in the field with mom until they're a little bit older, rather than being taken into a home because mom's taking good care of them, and because they're fat, happy kittens. And then another scenario is the finder's not willing to foster, and maybe you don't have a foster readily available, and the kittens are in a safe place. So in either of those cases where we're leaving kittens out in the community, we need to think about something other than wait till 8. And so that's where our Courageous Kittens program comes in. So Courageous Kittens, what we want if kittens are left out in the field is to get them in at just the right time so that we can make sure they become courageous kittens. And that is kittens that are very social to humans, that are going to solicit attention and be highly adoptable. Kittens that are going to go into homes and not hide under the bed for weeks. Kittens that are going to make people really excited about adopting them. So the sensitive period, also called the critical period sometimes, during which kittens are most easily socialized to humans, is 2 to 7 weeks of age. And that is neuroscience. So sometimes you will get lucky. Genetics does play a part, and there's individual variability. So sometimes people will say, oh, I've done it much when they're much older than that. Yes, of course, it's possible in some cases, but generally the critical or sensitive period is 2 to 7 weeks of age. So if you really want to ensure you're going to wind up with a courageous kitten that really wants to be with people, those are the ages at which we need to be spending the most time with them, introducing them to the most novel experiences. So what we like to do, just to finish up that slide, what we like to do is if kittens are left out in the field, so if we've convinced someone, these kittens look good, they're fat and happy, they're safe where they're at, just keep an eye on them. We want them back not at 8 weeks, we want them back at 5 weeks. So 5 weeks is a great age because it's very easy to socialize kittens when they're 5 weeks old, and you're not going to be able to just pick them up by hand at 5 weeks if they're outside with mom. You're still probably going to have to trap them because they've already learned to be feral by 5 weeks. But if we get our hands on them at that age, it's really easy to socialize them. They're also at an age at which they should be able to eat on their own, so you don't have to use resources to feed them around the clock. You can put out a bowl of baby cat kibble. I love baby cat kibble, and so this is my opportunity to say so and push that food. Give them a bowl of baby cat kibble to eat and not have to feed them around the clock. And they're also ready for vaccines and dewormer at that point. So it's a great time to get them. Next slide. So then the question is, what does that even look like? So our big problem is that people typically underestimate age. So someone will tell you that they have found a litter of 5-week-old kittens, and then you see them and they're 12 weeks old. So people always assume that the first time they see a kitten walking around under their porch, that it is a newborn kitten, and that's not the case. So there are great guides to aging kittens, both through Alley Cat Allies and Kitten Lady. Don't go by weight. So don't ask anyone to grab a kitten and weigh it, because kittens that are out in the environment being raised by mom are typically underweight for their age. And so you will, again, underestimate age. What you can do, what we do here, is we ask finders of kittens to send us pictures. And that typically means we haven't found a better, higher tech solution that works as well as people just texting me pictures of kittens. Amazingly, people have not taken advantage of having my cell phone number, and so I actually just get the text that I asked for, but I'm available, and if somebody finds kittens and we're trying to convince them to leave the kittens alone, or if we're trying to figure out if the kittens are old enough to come into the shelter for our Courageous Kittens program, then they'll just text me a picture and I'll age the kittens. Again, you can use a kitten street team, so you can actually have volunteers that are willing to go out and take a look at kittens and see how old they are. but again, people typically underestimate age, so never go by what a finder says. Next slide. So then what happens at 7 weeks? Let's say that let's say that we didn't get those kittens at 5 weeks. Here they are at 7 weeks. How does that really change the kitten's social development? And I see Julie smiling because she remembers this picture from my Facebook timeline, because this is a little group of 8-week-old kittens. I aged them at 8 weeks old when I trapped them. And I'm very much about getting kittens young or TNRing them. So I got these 8-week-old kittens that were large enough for spay and neuter, but they were just super cute. And so I decided I'm just going to try. I'm going to see how it goes. I'm going to try socializing them. And so again, pretty much anything can happen. They're past the sensitive period for socialization. And so I'm hoping for genetics to come into play and individual variability. So pretty much just by looking at the picture, you can probably guess what happened. That guy in the center there became a very confident kitten who was adopted by one of the vet techs at UC Davis. He's a great, very social cat, loves everyone he meets. That little guy on the left was a lot more shy, and he's the type of kitty that will hide under the bed when someone comes into the house, but he's very friendly with his owners. And then that girl on the right still lives in my house, waiting to become social enough for adoption. I guess she's mine now several years later. So she loves me when I'm sleeping. I can't put two hands on her. And when we moved cross country here, so I could work here at Kansas City Pet Project, she had to be trapped, and she rode cross country in a humane trap. So once you hit the end of that sensitive period, then there's no amount of skill that will overcome biology. So you can certainly try to socialize those kittens if you want. You won't always be successful, and you can only have so many cats living in your house that you can't touch. So have a plan for if it doesn't work out. Next slide. So for the Courageous Kittens program, what we want to do is we want to get those kittens into our care at 5 weeks, or it can also be a finder to foster thing. But we want to make it really clear to people that they have this brief window of opportunity to completely change the kitten's life forever. So we want to use special foster homes that are really busy, because we want to maximize the potential for socialization. If kittens can be kept in a main living area, that's perfect. And I know we talked in one of the other presentations about it's better for a kitten to be in a home than in a cage. This is a scenario where I'll also recommend that kittens actually live in a cage in the home. So I like to start them off in a pop-up cage in a main living area so that they feel safe, but they can see everything that's going on around them. They can hear the television, hear people talking, see other animals in the home from a safe location, and then they can come out of the cage once they're more social. Next slide, please. Okay, so you might consider levels of foster homes, and this wouldn't be a reward type system like all foster homes are great, but we want particular types of foster homes where there are multiple humans in the family to interact with the kitty. Maybe you have a foster family where they can actually take a kitten to work with them back and forth every day. That's great. Maybe you have a foster family where they're willing to harness train a kitten. So to be a courageous kitten, these kittens that we're getting in that 5 to 7 week window, we need them to be really interactive homes. You also want to give your foster families or your finder to fosters a list of goals for the kittens. So get them used to having their paws touched, get them used to having their nails trimmed if possible. Again, take them outside on a harness, get them to ride around in the car, have them meet strangers. I have a friend who literally takes her foster kittens everywhere she goes, including kayaking. She has the most social kittens I've ever seen. Also a stroller. I have another friend who uses a stroller and walks her kitties in a stroller around the neighborhood. And again, she has very social foster kittens. Whatever you can think of to expose them to, 5 to 7 weeks is the time. We want to create what we call micro stressors. So we don't want kittens to be terribly stressed out, but we want to push the boundaries of what they're willing to accept. Next slide. So the graduates of the program are going to earn a Courageous Kitten certificate, and you can even do a report card if you'd like, showing the potential adopter everything that the kitten's been exposed to. And then you can track your success by length of stay. How long are these kittens in the shelter? Probably not very long if they're in the shelter at all. By how many behavior calls you get on these kittens after they graduate from the program, by how often they're actually returned to the shelter for issues. My hope, this is a new program for us, but my hope is that I will find that kittens that graduate with Courageous Kitten certificates will be less likely to be returned to the shelter for problems. Another thing to do is to let local veterinarians know about the program and ask them for feedback. So when these kittens come into their veterinary clinics, do they notice a difference in the Courageous Kitten graduates? Next slide. Courageous Kittens, the goal is to improve the human-animal bond so that hopefully we have a kitten that's going to be in a home for its entire life. We also want to improve the welfare of the cat. We're really doing kittens a disservice if we don't make them as social as possible, because we want them to be comfortable in their homes. We want them to be comfortable with new things in their lives. So the more we can do to ensure that, the better. But this also improves the welfare of cats in general. A lot of cats appeal to cat people, but not to everyone. And so we really want to create kitties that will appeal to anyone, and not just those of us who are crazy cat people. And we also, again, want to reduce length of stay in the shelter should it be necessary that one of these kittens comes into the shelter. I'll also be interested to see if a Courageous Kitten that graduates through the course, if that kitten ever comes back to the shelter as an adult, will they be more comfortable in the shelter as an adult just because of their early kitten experiences? That's it.
That's amazing, and I love the whole theme of Courageous Kitten, and it's so clear, I think, for the folks that are involved in raising the kittens, that they need to be hyper involved with their kittens. I think traditionally, some of us, when we fostered, we sort of put kittens in the spare bedroom and outside of the rest of the family because that was the empty space. And now I understand that we're depriving those kittens of all the socialization that they needed to be courageous enough to go into a new family and be a valued pet. Thank you for that.
Another thing is that when we've done wait till 8 in the past, we found that kittens were sometimes coming back to the shelter at 8 weeks old, and they were very frightened kittens. And so I think this program is good not just for kittens that are left in the field, but it's really good for the wait till 8 kittens as well.
And I can see this integrated into any foster program, whether it's from the field or through the shelter, or even folks that are, have mama cats with babies, is that they should still work on socializing the kittens. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go into the Q&A session in a moment. And so if you have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A session and we'll ask them. We want to, while we're waiting for those questions to come in, mention that next week's webinar, we're honored to have Dr. Sarah Pisano, who's going to continue this theme of raising kittens through foster and talk about how these can be very upsized programs that are easier to run than before and are better and faster and accommodate many more animals. So that will be next Thursday at the same time, 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern. We also want to share a brand new resource with you for more staff training and getting into the details of raising kittens and having successful kitten shelter programs. This is at www.kittens sheltermedportal.com, and there's essentially entire courses on kittens that you can have your staff and volunteers sign up and complete. And then I think everybody's hearing now about the opportunity we have with reinventing animal sheltering in some ways. The COVID epidemic caused a rapid switch to essential services in shelters and a dependence on the community to come forward and assist. And that has really mushroomed into a recognition that the community is very powerful and they've just been waiting to help. And so there is a new program called Human Animal Support Services. You can see it explained on this website, and it is a call to action for shelters, rescues, and the public to come together and reinvent animal sheltering. So please do visit the website and see how your organizations can fit in. I see Kristen has come back online, and she's actually one of the main organizers of this new initiative. Kristen, what can you say about the Haas program?
Well, thank you so much for mentioning it, and we're so excited about it. It's just this thing that we've known for a long time is that we need to deinstitutionalize animal welfare, and we need to use a shelter as a last resort. Animal shelters are not going anywhere. Animals can't speak for themselves, and they're always going to need sheltering for emergencies, but so much more of our work can be done in homes, in the community, in people's neighborhoods. And Haas is really just going all in on that idea. Shelter is the last resort, and that community solutions are the first answer. So it's right in line with how we've treated community cats for years and years, thanks to people like you, Dr. Levy.
Oh. And then all of this work in the community means that you're going to be bringing in a lot of new volunteers in foster homes, people who have never done this before. In fact, in the very beginning of the COVID pandemic, when shelters appealed to the community to come and take animals from the shelter or do direct finder to foster sheltering, many, many thousands of people who had never done this before came forward, and they needed a lot of support. And we highly recommend the Kitten Lady. Every speaker here has mentioned the Kitten Lady and how valuable her training content is. So please do check out her website, kittenlady.org. She has many, many little videos on every aspect of raising kittens, as well as another series of 4 webcasts that are probably the best web content I've ever seen about what to do with kittens that are found in the field and how to support them through every life stage that they have. We also want to call attention to our partner in this web series. It's Royal Canin, and they have the cutest food ever, which is mother and baby cat. And it was interesting. It sounds very appealing to me. It's probably the marketing that appeals to me the most. But then incidentally, both the Kitten Lady and Heather Kennedy mentioned that this is their very favorite food, and they're using it not only for their kittens and their mother cats, but also debilitated cats that need a higher plane of nutrition. Royal Canin has a shelter program that has discount, and you can order a little bit or a lot. It's very flexible, and also gain points for some other rewards. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mandy to wrap it up for us. But first, a big call out and thank you to Maddie's Fund for believing in the Million Cat Challenge years ago and supporting it in a really big way, and to help us help shelters who have saved now 2.6 million more cats than they had before. So thank you to Maddie's Fund.
Just wondering, we do have a couple questions in the chat. Do you think we have a minute to run through those really fast?
We do.
Kick this off really quick. So Dr. Paisano says the kiosk is amazing at Orange County, but I'm wondering if this is also available online so people can register from home without coming into the shelter until there's an appointment for vaccines and deworming. And I know that there's a special form that can also be used with ACO. So Diane, can you tell us a little bit about that?
So for shelters that aren't doing physical intake, I definitely think you can send out a link to the form, and that would work probably just as well. I think probably having a staff member there can probably help seal the deal. But even if you're communicating via email or over the phone, I'm sure that support can still be offered. So I think it would be just as effective. But if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to do my best to answer them on the side or connect you with Nick to get you rocking and rolling with that.
Thank you, Diane. And we have one more kind of in the same light. Can you talk about the follow-up process? So how do you ensure once they're enrolled that they're coming in for the needed treatments and the spay and neuter? Is the onus on the shelter to make sure the kittens get in on time, or is the onus on the finder? And what have you found the compliance rate from that to be?
So that's a great question, because we especially don't want to feel like we're responsible for any more intact animals being out in the community. I'd say the burden is shared between the shelter and the finders. We initially launched the program with Kindness for Cats, and so that group of foster parents volunteered their time doing a lot of follow-up, and then that was transitioned to staff. And we don't offer the same level of follow-up, but we do reach out multiple times just to say, hey, how's the kitten doing? It looks like it's probably time to get them sterilized. Let's go ahead and get them in. What's your availability like? But the burden is also on the person as well. If those are services that they want, they're free. It's free spay neuter, free vaccines, free microchip, free combo testing. So it is a bit of a burden on them too, that if those are services they want, they need to reach out to us and work with our schedule. Truthfully, some of them will drop off the radar. And in those cases, if they stop responding to us, it's our hope that in those cases, the person has fallen in love and taken it upon themselves to pursue the necessary veterinary care. But those animals were never impounded in our shelter. They're essentially community animals that we are offering support for in a way that we never did previously. So even just by doing that, we're doing more than we were before.
More than you were.
Yeah. And so there will be some, of course, where that happens. But the compliance rate has been very good from what we found. People are either adopting them themselves, finding adopters for them, or returning them to the shelter. Those three outcomes are far, far more likely than the people who just drop off the radar. And so in those three, we are ensuring that, of course, if they're coming back to the shelter, if people are adopting them, that we're getting them spayed and neutered. There is, of course, a chance that they just stop responding after that point. If so, so be it. But we're doing far more than we ever did previously. And we will continue to do so.
Yeah, we'll have a page on the Million Cat Challenge website where there will be a link to the recorded version of this presentation, PDF copy of the slides that you can share with others, and then any documents and supporting materials.
Thank you, Dr. Levy, and I'm pretty sure this one's for you. Do you test very young kittens for FIV leukemia? If not, what do you do with kittens that test positive at a later date?
The first part of that question is complex, and the second part of the question is very easy. So I'll take that part first. We've moved to adoption programs for all positive cats. So as we know that if you test cats for FIV, that's an antibody test, and little kittens will absorb antibodies from their mother if the mothers are infected with FIV, but it's very uncommon for the kittens to actually be infected. So there's really no, it's not a great benefit to test young kittens for FIV, and if they are positive, you just hold them aside, and they will very likely go negative because they're not infected. But in the case of FELV, where we do see little kittens that are infected with FELV, there's just this explosion of adoption programs for them. And we have some other training materials on starting adoption programs for cats with FELV, and we really have used the adoption program at Austin Pets Alive as the foundation for that, and use a lot of their materials, and we've done great research with them as well to show how successful these adoption programs are. So that's the answer to part two, is if they're positive, we adopt them out. If they are, now the question is, who should you test in a shelter? And that's a much more complicated question. There is a move to reduce the amount of testing, routine screening of all cats in shelters, which was traditional in the past, so that those resources could be redeployed to other programs like Courageous Kitten programs and places where the limited resources that we have can be have a higher impact on feline life-saving. So for individually housed cats, there is really no urgent need to test them. And so many shelters now are cutting back on that and asking people to have their cats tested by their new veterinarian. And that transition has gone pretty smoothly where it's been used. If cats are going to be group housed, I do think that we should still be screening them at least for FELV, because cats can spread FELV with group housing.
Thank you, Dr. Levy. Dr. Kennedy, is there a quarantine period for kids when they first go into the foster home in the Courageous Kittens program?
So we always recommend that. That's a really good question, and something I was thinking of talking to Julie about, actually. So we always recommend keeping foster kittens separate from other cats and kittens in the home for a 2-week period. But again, the kittens that are going into the home to be socialized, we aren't recommending that they be kept in a separate bedroom or a separate bathroom. We want them right in the center of the home. And so a crate in the center of the home, if possible, is safe for everyone and still meets with any quarantine requirements. The main reason we do that is that if it's a kitten we haven't known for 2 weeks, then we're worried about maybe it's potentially carrying panleukopenia. So another reason is that we don't test our kittens for leukemia virus until they're spayed, so we don't know FELV status. So we do recommend keeping them segregated, but not in a completely separate room.
Last question here comes from Katie, and she says, more recently I have heard from rescues and individual fosters that fading kitten syndrome doesn't exist. I understand it's an umbrella term, but from a veterinarian's perspective, what could be a more nuanced discussion or approach? I think fosters should have some sort of formal or informal kitten training to avoid unnecessary suffering caused by, for example, aspiration. But we have to admit, we're never going to be a perfect replacement for kitten's real mom and the passive immunity they receive from their milk. Isn't that true?
I totally agree. I think raising little kittens, especially bottle babies, is not for the faint of heart. It is can be medically intense, and it's a very vulnerable period in time. So this is where your very experienced foster homes can be of a great asset. However, we've also seen that there's good programs where the very experienced foster parents become sort of mentors to the new ones, and you can expand your foster network by having these volunteer managers that have a little collection of new foster people below them. Also, I can't recommend enough the training videos at Kitten Lady. I know we keep saying that, but they're truly amazing, and they touch on almost every aspect of kitten care. And then I'd also call out with Nick's program with the automated emails that go out. One of the things that they do is with the little ones is they get an email about some kitten care that comes with their gift bag when they go home, and then the next day they get an email about peeing and pooping of little kittens, because that's about the time they're wondering if they're doing it right by stimulating them to eliminate. And then they get life stage emails automatically sent by that system that are appropriate for how old the kitten is automatically.
Thank you, Dr. Levy. Okay, we're right here running out of time, so I want to share something exciting with everybody really quick. Okay, so this is a wonderful new campaign that's once again brought to you by our friends at Royal Canin, and we all know that there are over 90 million cats in the U.S., but do we know that more than half of them are not making it in to receive their yearly exam? So in order to improve the healthcare of cats in the United States, Royal Canin is launching its 5th annual Take Your Cats to the Vet, that's Cat to Vet. The campaign aims to improve the healthcare of cats across the country by encouraging owners to schedule regular veterinary checkups for their feline companions. So you guys, in this box, it's jam-packed with exciting things to encourage your adopters and your fosters to make that connection, prioritize feline wellness. One of you on this webinar today, we're going to draw names randomly, is getting 50 of these boxes to share with your fosters or your adopters, and we're going to be doing this at the end of every webinar. So we so appreciate your time today for coming along on this 5-part journey with us from tip to tail, kitten management. Thank you to our presenters today. Thank you, Dr. Julie Levy, and a huge thank you, as always, to Maddie's for letting us play here with you and for making all of this possible. Have a great day, everyone.